I'm Lisa Stone. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Parenting Aces. I'm so glad you decided to join us for this week's episode of the Parenting Aces podcast. We are talking with Tim Russell, the head of the Intercollegiate Tennis Association, the ITA, about this new transition tour that was recently announced by the ITF and the potential impact it's going to have on college tennis and college tennis recruiting. And we've got a great conversation with Tim. But before I jump into that, I wanted to just let you guys know I got the chance to go to Montgomery, Alabama and watch some of the Blue-Gray tournament, and it is such an awesome event. And if you guys have kids that are on the college tennis pathway, you have got to get out to some of these college matches. I mean, the quality and the level of tennis that is being played by these kids nowadays is just through the roof. And besides that, it's just fun. It's not like going to a junior tournament where everybody's all tense and quiet and whispery. This is rowdy. It's full of team support and rah-rah, and it's just a blast. So if you haven't gotten out to a dual match yet this year, please take a look at your local team's schedule, whether it's D1, D2, D3, JUCO, NAIA. I mean, it doesn't matter which division of college tennis you go watch. I promise you're going to see some great tennis and you're going to have so much fun. So please get that on your schedule ASAP. Now, we are going to transition into my conversation with Tim, and like I said, this new ITF transition tour has a lot of people kind of scratching their heads, not sure what to do about it, not sure what to make of it, and especially when it comes to the whole question of college tennis and how college players are going to be treated by this new tour. There's just a lot of unanswered questions, as you'll hear Tim say over and over and over again. And to his credit, Tim has done an incredible amount of research. He has reached out to the folks at the ITF, including ITF President Dave Haggerty. And if that name sounds familiar to you, it's because Dave is a past president of the USTA, which kind of sort of begs the question of, wouldn't he kind of pay attention to the impact that this change is going to have on U.S. college tennis? So we're going to have to wait and see what the actual ramifications are, or maybe this is going to wind up being a really good thing for college tennis, and I certainly am pulling for that outcome. But in the meantime, I hope you'll enjoy listening to Tim and his thoughts on how we need to approach the whole idea of transitioning from now juniors to college, and for those players who have professional tennis on their long-term radar, how this new ITF transition tour is going to play out for them. So relax, enjoy my conversation with Tim Russell. Tim Russell of the ITA, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Lisa, and with your listeners.
Well, always a pleasure to have you on too. And I always know that I'm going to get straight talk from you. So I'm very excited to jump right into the conversation about the ITF's announcement of its new transition tour and how that's going to impact not only college-bound junior players, but also those current college players who are looking to move on to the pro tour once they finish their college careers. So I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to let you talk to us a little bit about the ins and outs of this transition tour and your understanding of how it's going to affect those of us connected to the college game.
Well, thanks, and thanks for having me, but also for having this important topic available to your listeners. So first of all, I think the answer to your question of how this is going to impact everyone, I think the best answer is that we don't know. I think we can agree that the premises that the ITF started with are probably, good ones in terms of who is a pro player, how many were actually making money. I think everybody knows there were certain things they were trying to solve, including some gambling issues at lower level, entry level futures, etc. So if we take as a premise, what their givens were, I think, they were trying to solve what they perceived as real problems. But the direct answer to your question is we don't know with what they've announced how that's actually going to impact people. So my answer might be a little long, and then we can get into some specifics. But first of all, as you know, I've been in the world of tennis my whole life, but only, working in the tennis industry for the past 3 years. And some of my observations, to your point about being candid, is that the more I've been in the tennis world, I know that there are now a lot of silos. We've got the ATP, we have the WTA, we've got the ITF, and the ITF put out this transition tour, and obviously there were some consultations, obviously, with ATP and WTA. I can tell you that I tried very hard in my role as the CEO of the ITA to make sure that we had, our voice heard. I did speak with Dave Haggerty, the president of the ITF, last September in New York. I expressed my concerns that we had to make sure that the transition tour was not detrimental to college players or prospective college players. He put me in touch with Andrew Moss of the ITF, who was working on helping to design the transition tour. We had lovely chats. I applaud Andrew for listening. We talked a lot about both intended and unintended consequences, and without diverting too much in the world of history, I think a lot of people know that I chaired the USTA's Junior Competition Committee when we tried to make a major change. So I learned a lot, not only about intended and unintended consequences, but also about processes. And I talked a lot to Andrew about these unintended consequences. I also provided for the ITF a study that I had the ITA staff do, which was comparing the top 50 ranked men and women in the college rankings with the top 50 ITF juniors by way of UTR. And I thought that was an important data point. One of the things that I think most college coaches would agree is that we need a common currency, and UTR clearly could be part of that. And when I asked Andrew and the ITF if they would use UTR, their response was that obviously every federation doesn't use UTR. At that point, I responded that if they announced that starting in 2019 it was part of the transition tour, I thought that every federation would, but they're not doing that. So that leads me to what some of the challenges are. One, we now know in what they've put out that the transition tour will have its own point system, and that if a player plays in the transition tour, they're not actually getting ATP and WTA points. So some of the big issues that I think people need to be questioning is, one, how are the points going to work going from the transition tour to the ATP and WTA? But bigger issues are going to be, how do you actually get into the transition tour events? And as you know, not only juniors, but a lot of college players have historically not only tried to play in futures, but their real pathway has been through the qualifiers to the futures. So some of the qualifiers to the futures have actually been draws of as much as like 128. And now those draws are going to be shrunk down to like 24. And the question is going to be, all right, where do all those other 100 players in that particular city go to try to get their entry, their point of entry? And so what I'm concerned about is that a number of us, and I do count myself in the circle, have spent the last 15 to 20 years convincing people that going to college is a pathway to pro tennis. And the new leadership at the USTA in player development with Martin Blackman has certainly embraced that. And last year at the US Open, we certainly saw how many college players were being successful. So some of my concerns are that we potentially could be going back to the 90s, where people really thought they had to turn pro at 15 or 16 years old. And my concern is that at the same time that discussion is going on, I think we all know now that the average age of the top 100 men and women is actually getting older. I think for men it's 27 or 28 years old, and for women it's 26 or 7. And the reality is there are going to be a lot of people having to figure out how this is going to work. So sadly, Lisa, if you thought today I was going to tell everybody how to make their pathway decisions, that's not happening, because I think we're all going to have to feel our way together. And I'll give you some of the things that the ITA is doing ourselves, and some of the things we're trying to do in partnership with the USTA. First of all, I have a wonderful working relationship with Martin Blackman and with Stephen Armitage at USTA Player Development. I've been in conversations with Megan Rose, who runs the USTA Pro Circuits. All of us will be on calls in the coming weeks trying to figure out how we navigate this. As you know, the USTA had as a business model that they were trying to get a lot of futures events and challenger events on college campuses. And this provided opportunities not only for the college players to play on their campus, but for young juniors who were in the neighborhood to try to qualify, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of the decisions that our coaches are going to now have to make is, should they be trying to put these transition tours on their college campuses? Because it used to be that the logic was, okay, we'll put a college challenger here on our campus, and then if our players get points, then this is going to help them transition to the pro circuit. And Stephen Armitage had a formula that he did very well, and I'm sure you could have him on, where his goal was to get people like the Chris Eubankses and people like Francesca Di Lorenzo to a certain point, whether it was top 300, top 250, while they were still in college. And this was a model that was working quite well. And again, without us knowing how the transition points are going to work, how they're going to transition to the ATP and WTA, there's a lot of decisions that really we just don't know the answers to at the moment. One of the last things I'll say before we kind of dig a little deeper is some of my concern also is that this idea of taking the pyramid, if you draw a pyramid, and we're basically saying that 700 or 800 players are pros, and the bottom of the pyramid we're not sure. One of the things I think we have to be careful of is that we don't kill off the dream for everybody at the bottom of the pyramid for the long-term health of the sport of tennis. I mean, even that young junior who's trying to qualify to get into a futures thinks of becoming a pro player. And I'll use my son, Jeff Russell, as an example. I mean, he was in high school in Phoenix. He was a state champion in Arizona. There was a future in Phoenix, and he went and actually played in the qualies, won a couple of rounds. And there's just a lot of stuff with the new model that we don't know how it's going to actually work. But the one thing I can tell you that we're trying to do with the ITA, and this is something that is important, the ITA is trying to take a leadership role to demonstrate how a new model might work not only in America but around the world, and that is in reference to our summer circuit, which a lot of people know about. Summer circuit has historically been a place over 6 weeks in June and July leading to an August championship where high school players and college players have played together. And we're hoping to create a model where we're going to hope to add some prize money to our last major tournaments to hope to bring in some of the young professionals who would find this as a good opportunity. And one, potentially they might be able to make more money than they could at a futures, but two, it should then make it where more even better college players want to play in those events as well. So while the ITA obviously didn't make the decisions about the transition tour, we tried to have our voices heard. We are trying to make sure that we're doing our part to create not only play opportunities, but really high-level play opportunities. So in closing, I would say, to try to answer your question, I am confident that, certain kids are going to navigate this no problem. I mean, if you go, let's just use an example. If you take somebody like a Brandon Holt who plays at USC. He has a brilliant coach in Peter Smith, but he's also got, brilliant parents and Tracy Austin and Scott. Well, somebody like that is going to figure out how to navigate this. But, just the average person, whether it's a junior or a college player, is really going to have some good advice. And we're going to try to do our best to provide information, but that information is going to be forthcoming, I think, over the course of not only this year until the transition tour starts, but after people see how it works for a year or so. I do know that our coaches are concerned. You should know that I have not only sent out and distributed the ITF release to all our coaches, but I'm holding a series of town hall meetings with our coaches. Our coaches are really smart. But getting back to the intersection with juniors, where you, Lisa, have done so much great work, I continue to believe that given the average age of top pros getting older, that the place for juniors to aspire to play tennis is in college. And that is not just because Tim Russell's the CEO of the ITA. I can tell you that, aside from working your way through a bunch of futures, you just had to go watch either our men's or women's team indoor and follow the level of play to where teams were winning 7-6 in the third on the last court on. And you're not only playing for yourself, but you're playing for your team, and you're getting great coaching, and you're getting a school to pay for that, and you're getting an education. And if you then turn pro later on with some of the new rules and regulations in college tennis, these schools are pretty much guaranteeing you that they'll pay for your degree when you come back to school. So, the people who are listening, after I've given this very long answer, and thank you for giving me the platform, I do think that junior players in America should continue to aspire to go to college, even if they're aspiring to be a pro player. How it's going to navigate through the transition tour in the futures, a lot of other smart people are going to try to figure out. But what I would encourage people is not to start rushing to judgment to go, at 15 or 16, I have to choose the transition tour path. I personally believe that would be a mistake, and I believe that professionally as well.
So what's going to happen to the kids transitioning out of college this year or early next year? This is one of the things that frustrates me with tennis, and it happens at the junior level, and obviously it's happening at the professional level, is these changes get put in place, but there's no sort of method for the people that are already in the system, and they end up really suffering for that. And I worry about that for the kids who were thinking, I'm ready to go out on the pro tour, but now how do I do that? I'm in college, I'm doing well, I'm winning, and there's not really a pathway described for me.
So that one, at least my reading of this, and I've read through it a lot of times, the people who are getting ready to just leave college, I think they're going to have an easier path than potentially those in a couple of years. And I'll tell you why I say that, is that with the transition tour just getting started in 2019, I think those better players coming out of college, the transition tour will probably be their route. I think the challenge I have is the person who's making a decision as to whether I go to college next year as a freshman, play for 4 years, and then if I have to start with the transition tour at the end, I'm going to be way behind the people who've come up through ITF juniors. Mm-hmm. That's why in my ideal world, I would love if the ITF used something like a UTR, and with their listing of automatic acceptances into a tournament, they have certain amounts that are designated for, let's say, top, ITF juniors. For me, if I was able to demonstrate now as my role with the ITA that the top college player had a higher rating than the ITF junior, my, question to the ITF and my ask of them would be, why would that ITF junior get the place before a higher UTR college player? And those are the things we're not going to know. I'm pretty confident that the players who are going to graduate this year from college and just start the transition tour in 19, they're probably going to be okay starting from ground level. The ones who I think are going to be really asking questions are going to be the top juniors who are now saying, should I go to college or should I do the transition tour route? That's why I gave my hope for them. Sadly, I think too many parents get caught up. And what I don't want to have happen, this is where you're so smart and you've dealt with this for many years, is I think in the absence of good information, too many parents make too many knee-jerk reactions. And so my advice is also to stay calm and patient and we just don't know. That was the first message I sent. I was looking forward to being on with you and I tried to prepare my thoughts. My first one is we just don't know what's going to happen. My last one was still go to college.
Right.
But to answer your specific question, I think the recent college grads will probably, do all right. And then over the next 2 to 3 years, we'll see how this system works. And I think to the ITF's credit, they've made it clear, even if it's not comfortable for people, that there's still more information forthcoming. So I think we're going to have to trust that they're going to keep studying and looking at this. And what they're trying to do is very hard. And this is why I can say, I dealt with this when I was doing the USTA junior comp issue, and this affects the entire world. But I also think it affects the future of all of tennis in a really large way that I hope when I spoke to guys like Andrew Moss that we really are thinking through the unintended consequences.
Sure. One thing that comes to mind, and I'm sure you're already having this conversation, is there a way to have wild cards available to college players?
So Martin Blackman and I just exchanged emails today, and we're going to be on a call with Stephen and Megan Rose on what will be next week, which I think, if I haven't screwed this up, will have just happened the day before you broadcast this. Sorry, but the fact is, you're very smart and you know what the issues are, and those are the kind of things that we're talking about. But again, the USTA has wild cards that we can pair with the ITA, and that's what we're talking about. But, we also have issues where college tennis has international players as well, and where the USTA is mostly focused on American college players. With the ITA, I'm looking at everybody who plays college tennis. So it's a great idea. We're certainly going to explore it, and it will be one of many avenues we explore.
And, is it possible that there would be an ITA wild card as opposed to a USTA wild card for college players?
Well, I think these are all the kind of questions that we should be asking. Again, because you've mentioned that I'm usually a candid person and I've done my best to be proactive. I think you've heard me say in the past, I prefer to be an architect upstream instead of a plumber downstream. I did, reach out to Dave Aggerty. I reached out to Andrew Moss. I reached out to players on the ATP Player Council. What I offered to everyone was, hey, we have a bunch of smart coaches here. The ITA stands ready to work with all of our coaches to get their input. What didn't happen was circulating a lot of proposals and asking for feedback. The first we saw everything in spite of asking was when everybody saw it. Mm-hmm. So I know that I've thought a lot about this. I know I've thought a lot about process and structures because of my work with the USTA Junior Comp. But I know that we have within the ITA a bunch of much smarter tennis minds than me. And I hope that as this continues to unfold, that the people who are making decisions will talk with them. I do know that some of our very top coaches, some who coach national championship teams, who on their own have reached out to the highest levels of the ITF. All I know is that, in my estimation, getting all the people who are impacted to sit around the table at once is an avenue I would have pursued and something that really didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that I'm seeing, and, there's a lot of chatter about this very issue all over social media. Dave Miley who was with the ITF. He's now with UTR. He has been very outspoken on social media regarding his thoughts, and I'm still hoping to get a chance to chat with him. But what is the impact of this? Like you said, of course, the ITA still is encouraging juniors to go to college first, and I hope that it's beyond obvious that that's my stance as well. But from a recruiting standpoint for college coaches, and let's face it, a lot of college coaches do a lot of recruiting outside the U.S., and love it or hate it, that's just the reality of college tennis. Have you heard any talk from the coaches about how this could impact their recruiting efforts?
So let me just, before I answer that, just reflect briefly on what you said about Dave Miley, who's not only a very smart guy, but very experienced. I actually, retweeted his, tweet in my small social media world, and I made sure that all of our coaches were aware of that, because here's a very knowledgeable guy who understands the issues, who, quite honestly went out on his own to articulate things. So to morph to the answer to your question now about our coaches, it comes back to my first answer of we just don't know, because the one thing about this transition tour is it's not just going to impact American juniors. I mean, it's going to impact, the whole world. So it will impact, international players. There are some players, Lisa, some coaches, because you asked about what the coaches are saying, who actually think that this holds the potential to strengthen college tennis. And that might seem counterintuitive, because most people are going, oh my gosh, people are going to go quickly turn pro at 15. A lot of people are going to say, okay, because we don't have these qualifying draws at 128, it's going to be much harder to do this. The best place for me to go to develop my game is college. And so I think a lot of it's going to be dependent, when you ask about recruiting, to be how articulate the coaches are about creating their narrative, because will contend, whether it's a Steve Johnson, a John Isner, a Kevin Anderson, a Nicole Gibbs, that the top college players will find a way to rise to the top of pro tennis, no matter what the structure is. What I encouraged the ITF not to do was to build a structure that put artificial impediments in the way. And clearly guys like Stevie and Isner and Nicole, they figured out how to get good. You look at, Jenny Brady, she didn't graduate, but, she's 2 years at UCLA, and, she's been top 50 in the world. She might be 80 or something now, but I still think that people are going to realize that going to college has a lot of benefits. And I would encourage people to read a study that I did with my son, Jeff, years ago. It's still up on the internet on the USTA site, called Going to College or Turning Pro. And it still makes the same arguments for the costs and the cost benefit analysis. So, your specific question was about recruiting, and I can tell you that all of our ITA coaches have different approaches to recruiting, where they recruit, who they talk to, what their sales pitch is. So I think there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all answer. I do think the next, 2 to 5 years are really going to be, critical for people to figure this out. But there are people who argue that this could actually strengthen college tennis, because it could drive more people there, realizing that the other is too uncertain. With college tennis, you know exactly what the certainties are.
Sure. Well, and it's interesting, because when I first heard about this, I thought, oh, this sounds like a great idea. I mean, there's so many players that call themselves professional players, and they are, to their credit, they are living that life, but they're paying to live that life. They're not being paid to live that life. Yep. And, that's a horrible situation to be in, unless you've got money raining down from the heavens, to cover your expenses. But, we all have seen the data. I mean, it costs in excess of $100,000 a year to be out on the pro circuit, with travel and all of that. So, at first I thought, well, this is great. It's going to keep those players who really don't belong in pro tennis, who are doing it more as just kind of I'm not ready to go into the real world yet, so I'll keep playing tennis for a little bit longer. It would be a way to move those people quicker into adulthood, and I'm using air quotes here. But the more I read about it and the more I think about it, the more I realize that I don't think that's the case, it makes me really sad for the person that comes to mind for me is Tennis Sandgren. Here's a guy who went to school. He had a great college tennis career. He's been fighting his way in the Futures and Challengers for years, and then he has this breakout Australian Open. Would he have been able to do that under this new structure?
So again, as you always are, you've not only thought through the issues, but you've articulated them beautifully and in a heartfelt way. Let me try to respond to the very beginning and then the end. When you talked about the number of people who weren't making any money, to the ITF's credit, their heavy research showed who wasn't making money. And out of the 12 to 14,000 people who might have played in a futures, they demonstrated that maybe 2,000 people actually made money. So to your point, a lot of people were paying to play. So again, one of the first premises that I brought to the show today was that, we might agree on the premises of what the ITF thought they were going to accomplish. To the end of your thought, I don't think we know the answer to the Tennis Sandgren question, but he's a perfect illustration, and there are others, like him as well. And what I've tried to do is intersect even below that part of the pyramid, because you have to have the base of the pyramid wide to get enough people to the top of the pyramid. And quite honestly, my largest concern is I've already articulated this once, but I think it's an important point, that I don't think we want to build a structure that kills off the dream for tens of thousands of people. We all know, whether it is football, basketball, the NCAA research arm does studies all the time. It's a very small percentage of people who play college football who make it to the NFL. Whether it's tennis, football, basketball, we all know that the pyramid could go from 300,000 or 400,000 kids playing high school tennis to how many play college tennis, to how many make pro. It's the same for every sport. But if you create a structure where the dream is killed for the bottom of the pyramid, that I think potentially holds harm for the long-term success of our sport. And our sport, is challenged enough as it is. Everybody gets excited when they see the Grand Slams, but tennis is already kind of a challenge sport. So this is a really critical crossroads for all of us to try to work to not only educate people, but hopefully to make the necessary tweaks going forward to have this work for, all parts of the pathway.
So have you been contacted by some of these juniors that are at this crossroads now? And if so, other than saying we don't know, which I get, we really don't know, how do we guide these families into making a good decision? And I'm avoiding the word right decision. I'm saying a good decision.
So first of all, you're helping. I'm sorry we couldn't give all the answers today, but we're at least telling people what we know. In my profession, I'm trying to get our coaches not only educated by sending this around, but by holding these town meetings. I know that our friends at the USTA, Martin Blackman, Stephen, my son, Jeff, all these people are thinking about these things. But the reality is everything's moving quickly. You got to remember the ITF just announced this, on the 1st of February. I know that, USTA Pro Circuits is working on this. I know it'll be discussed at the USTA annual meeting coming up in the middle of March at La Costa. I know that my approach from whether I was at the USTA or now running the ITA, we try to put out, FAQs to help people, but I think the advice that a lot of smart people can offer is things like welcome uncertainty. My friend Ellen Langer at Harvard, who I've done research with, says, we all want certainty in life, but it doesn't always happen. So one, people are going to have to be a little patient. Two, I think, some of the general advice is not to make knee-jerk reactions. I think the obvious one that we've referenced already is everybody's going, oh my gosh, I don't know, and I think my kid can be the next Roger Federer, so they better turn pro at 15. Mm-hmm. And that's where I have, even though it might not seem specific enough, my general advice right now is plan to go to college. Right. If you get into college and then you want to turn pro after 2 or 3 years, fine. There are case studies, forget even about the transition tour. Follow what happened to Noah Rubin. Follow, what's going to happen with Chris Eubanks. Follow what's going to happen to Patrick Kipson. There's very few people who are going to become top 100 tennis players. Right. That's the thing where the kids and the parents have to be smart. And sadly, it's usually the parents who have false ideas about where their kids are going to go. So whether it's a transition tour, whether it used to be a 15 or 25K, whatever, the best thing is, you got to keep developing your game. Get as good as you can. But ultimately, my calculus, the equation I use is that the top 100 pros are now in the men's side, let's just say 27. The other study Jeff Russell and I did was to show that from the time you announce you're turning pro to if you make the top 100, and that's not a guarantee, is 4 to 5 years. Now, in my math book, if you subtract, 5 from 27, that's 22, which just happens to be the age that you are when you graduate from college. Right. The reality is, I know there's all sorts of research about developmental stuff. You can read Bloom. Everybody tries to cherry pick 13-year-olds and whatever. And we can all follow, how all these various paths are going. You can follow Francis Tiafoe and Stefan Kozlov and Tommy Paul and Riley Opelka, and you can follow guys like Kipson. But in the end, my advice to young junior tennis players is to get as good as you can, play as many matches as you can, listen to smart people. But ultimately, I still think the avenue is going to be to college tennis, and it's not just because I run, the ITA. Right. I also know that the large number of people who don't make it to be a top 100 are going to have had an education, are going to become champions on and off the court. They can love tennis all of their lives. I would just encourage people not to make knee-jerk reactions with not enough information.
I suspect that one of the, I won't say unintended consequences, but just consequences of this could be additional pressure on the college coaches to really focus on player development, which a lot of them don't do right now. They're looking, a lot of coaches are looking to bring in already developed players. And yes, they may get a little better during college, but for the most part, they're looking for players that are ready to go and, perform and earn those all important points on the tennis court. And so maybe, this will be a challenge to the coaches to really kind of rethink their approach to player development once the players do get to them on the college campus. I don't know, just a thought. It's just something that popped into my brain as you were talking, and it'll be interesting to see if that happens, because there are some coaches now on both the men's and the women's side in college that are known for being developmental coaches, but then there are a lot of them that don't have that reputation. Yep. And it'll be interesting to see, if things change in that regard.
Yep. I do want to return, if it's all right, because we did a general intro by way of the transition when I was making my points about the transition tour. But if we can just speak a little more about the ITA summer circuit, which some junior parents and players might not know about it. A lot of top juniors, are out always playing the USTA summer events and sectionals and clay courts and hard courts, and we encourage everybody to do that. But I think one of the coolest things that the ITA developed long before I showed up, but we've been trying to strengthen, is we do have this ITA summer circuit, and there are going to be 50 tournaments this summer in 50 different cities over 6 weeks that are going to culminate in a national championship at Texas Christian University in August. And these tournaments are open tournaments. So literally a high school player can play a college player could play a local pro, etc. And I really encourage juniors in America to enter these because I think they get a whole different view of the kind of players as opposed to playing the same person you've played in your hometown 14 times in the USTA events or high school tennis. A wide array of players, and you really can kind of gauge where you stand in the world of high school through college. And the other thing is that these tournaments are powered by UTR. So the ITA does have a partnership with UTR. All of these events are run through the UTR events site, and so all of the tournament results quickly go into the UTR system. So that's a great way for people who are trying to build their UTRs to have competitive matches. The ITA has been trying different formats. We've had some flighted events. We really are committed to making the ITA summer circuit, a place where people can get the most competitive matches so that you're not showing up and either winning 6-0, 6-1 or losing 6-0, 6-1. So we really are committed to this idea of development through competitive matches. We've partnered with UTR. There are 50 tournaments all around the country, and if an American junior hasn't played in this summer circuit, I would encourage you to consider doing so.
Yeah, I love the ITA summer circuit, and people who've been following Parenting Aces know I do at least one article every year to remind people to sign up. And usually we have you on or Erica on to talk about what's on tap for the summer. Let's talk details about the summer circuit. What is the draw size going to be this year? Singles and doubles, back draw? How do people sign up? Let's give all the specifics so people can start planning ahead.
So one of the things I would say is when you talked about having Erica on, that's probably still a good idea. And the other one who can really give good answers is Corey Brooks, who's our terrific director of championships, and the summer circuit falls under his purview. And I can tell you that last year we integrated things like the flighted events as a pilot test, and that was well received. We are trying to make sure that the draw sizes not only create competitive, matches, but that they can get through the singles and doubles within the course of the weekend. Much like my first answer on the transition tour, is that all of the final details have not been determined. We do have all of the hosts. We will be having a series of meetings as soon as our team indoors are done to finalize the answer to the specific question that you asked. So I would encourage you to have Corey and or Erica come back to answer all of those questions, but all of the info will be up on the ITA website, and there'll obviously be a lot of information put out about the summer circuit. But full disclosure, back to the theory of being candid, each and every answer to the questions about draw sizes and the like have not actually been finalized. So because we pilot tested a few things last year, and some of the final decisions still need to be made.
Okay. And so, I encourage everybody to take a look at this. And if there's any way you can get your junior player or even your current college player signed up for one or more of these events this summer, I promise you it will be a positive experience. I love these tournaments. I love the way they're run. I love the atmosphere, the vibe around them. It's an incredible opportunity, especially like Tim said, for the junior players to really get a feel for what the college game feels like being on the court across the net from a college player. It is a different game than junior tennis for sure. And this is just such an awesome way for them to get introduced. And I think it's really important that, Tim, that y'all keep tweaking these and making them better. And I mean, they were already great, but all of the little changes that y'all continue to make. And of course, I'm a big fan of UTR, so I love that they're powered through that platform. I think it's fantastic. And, it's, I mean, again, with all of this talk of this ITF transition tour, and, we have all of these options for how our kids should get ready for college, and especially for that first fall in college. And, a lot of kids, like you mentioned before, Tim, they may try and get into a futures, they'll play qualies for futures. But these ITA summer circuit events really should be included, along with maybe a couple open tournaments, men's and women's open tournaments, that we've talked about before on this podcast as well. So,
thank you for not only that very kind endorsement, but just for people to be clear, the website is actually www.itatennis.com. And if you scroll across the top, it says events. And if you scroll down to the second thing, there's a click through for ITA summer circuit. So it is easy to find. So thank you for the endorsement, and I'm thrilled that you continue to promote them.
Oh, absolutely. And do you know if UTR has them listed on their tournament portal yet?
I can't answer that, but I could probably go on the website. But we do partner with them. And last year, one of the big upgrades was the partnership with them, so that, all of the tournament directors use this. This is where the players are going to enter. And people who've gotten more interested in UTR can not only find them, but one of the old problems, quite honestly, used to be, if we had a challenge, it was, my son and daughter played in a summer circuit event and it hasn't shown up on their UTR yet. And the fact that we're partnering with UTR, all of the draws are going directly into their match database. So it should populate people's UTRs as quickly as UTR does that.
Right. And just so my listeners know, I'll check that out, and I will have the links for the ITA's website. But if the tournaments are already in the UTR portal, I'll also include that link in the show notes. So be sure and check that out, and you'll just be able to click through and go right to it and get your kids signed up and get it on the calendar. So Tim, what else is going on in the world of college tennis? I mean, we're early in the season. I am actually, by the time this airs, I will have already gone to the Blue Gray this weekend in Montgomery, Alabama, which is an awesome tournament that happens every year. And the school my son played at last year, their team travels to that tournament every year. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of his Bronco buddies. And what else is happening around the world of college tennis?
So first of all, the Blue Gray is a great event. When my son played at the College of William & Mary, they always played. My wife and I went there. It was always one of our favorite tournaments. So college tennis is in the throes of the spring season. The ITA Division I men's and women's team indoors have just completed. Those were both thrilling events. North Carolina beat Pepperdine for the women's championship, and Wake Forest ended up beating UCLA in the men's championship.
Yes, my poor Bruins. It was a battle.
Well, but there were a bunch of events a bunch of matches like I've never seen. There were matches that literally ended 4-3 on, 7-6 in the third on the last match on. So one thing I can tell you is that there's great parity in college tennis. That's one thing that's great. But in addition to focusing on D1, obviously the ITA serves all of college tennis. So this coming week is the men's D3 team indoor, and then March 2nd through 4th is the women's D3 in Chattanooga, and I'll be traveling there. Obviously, college teams have been having a lot of their dual matches and will be getting into the height of their season. And the ITA, not only looks forward to continuing to covering college tennis, but for those people who don't know, the ITA has a very extensive awards program. I think everybody knows that tennis players historically have not only been good students, but have had high graduation rates. So we're very proud of not only our ITA Scholar Athlete program for individuals, but also the teams. So the spring will also see the ITA awards program. But we also continue to try to improve our coaching education opportunities. We've now got a series of webinars for coaches. We're getting ready for our convention next year. We have a wonderful board of directors who's working very hard. We've been trying to raise the profile of college tennis, and I think most people know that the world of intercollegiate athletics is usually dominated by football and basketball, but I do think our really fine marketing and social media team has started to move the dial in the world of tennis. So I think all is going really well in the world of college tennis. It's an exciting game, and one of the messages that I like to send to everyone, because earlier in the show you referenced international players, there is a spot in college tennis for every American junior who wants to play. So if we're going to really have an overarching message as we try to continue to grow college tennis, the messages are keep getting better, keep working hard at your academics as well as your athletics. And if you want to play college varsity tennis, there'll be a spot. If you want to play tennis on campus, there will be a spot. But college tennis is healthy. The mission of the ITA is not only to just serve college tennis, but to advance the sport. So I appreciated, Lisa, you're referencing that we're always trying to improve things, whether those are our championships, our summer circuit, our social media, or our awards program. So we're working hard on behalf of college tennis, and we know that in doing so, we will return the leaders of tomorrow.
Absolutely. And I mean, we can't not touch on the fact that the Tennis Channel is airing college tennis this year. I mean, that's huge.
It's awesome. And we've got to give great shout outs not only to the Tennis Channel, but to, again, our friends at the USTA, people like Virgil Christian, who's working very hard with Tim Cass at the National Tennis Center. The fact that all of the college match days are on the Tennis Channel is huge. The fact that UTR is working, the ITA is working, the USTA is working. I mean, there are a lot of people who are working very hard each and every day to advance our sport. So without getting ahead of ourselves, this idea of promoting more things on TV is certainly something that the ITA is working on as we continue to improve our fall championship. So I'll give a little curtain raiser teaser for people to pay attention to next fall as well.
Awesome. And I just want to say to my listeners, you have no excuse to not watch college tennis this year, because even if you don't have a team close by that you can go to their matches, which I'm sorry, but almost every community has college tennis within an hour, I think. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but I mean, there's so many college tennis programs out there that pretty much everybody could find a program to go support, right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
We have 1,600 programs around the country.
Okay, so there you go. So even if you say, I can't get to a tennis match live, now you really have no excuse, because the Tennis Channel is airing these college match days that are taking place at Lake Nona, and they are featuring the top teams in the country. And hopefully, as this platform continues to expand, they will expand to, maybe some of the mid-major schools, maybe some of the NAIA schools will start to be featured. I think it would be really cool to focus not only on the top Division I schools, but also these other divisions as well, because as Tim said, there is a college tennis team out there for every kid that wants to play. You may just have to do a little research to figure out the best fit, but it's there, I promise.
No doubt. And as a tennis junkie, I was riveted to the first match between Florida and Florida State, where one of the singles went down to like a 10-8 tiebreaker. Another one was at 9-7, and the two-team matches were incredibly exciting. The format that we have, created is very exciting, and I think fans are enjoying it, whether it's on TV or live. The doubles continues to be riveting, and as Greg Patton likes to say, when you get time to the singles, it's like going to a giant Harkins or AMC theater and watching 6 films at one time. You can look around and see one that's an adventure film, one that's a comedy, but when you have 6 singles matches going on at one time, it is exciting. And you add no ad scoring and people playing the big points. The format and the product that we have developed, I think, really has fans as well as players really excited about college tennis.
Well, that's good to hear, and I'm a big fan, and I hope that you and I will run into each other at something this year.
Well, I'm going to be in Wake Forest for the D1 NCAAs, and if you happen to be in Chattanooga the 1st to 4th of March, I'll be for the D3 Women's Indoors, but otherwise we'll look forward to seeing you wherever that might be, and thanks again for all you do for our sport.
Well, thank you for always being willing to chat with me about anything and everything. I feel like I reach out to you quite a bit, and you're always super responsive, and I just really appreciate that, and I know my listeners do too. So thanks for spending the hour with us, Tim.
It was awesome. You take care, and we'll look forward to the next time.
Great. Thanks so much. And to my listeners, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on Parenting Aces. I'm Lisa Stone, and you've been listening to the Parenting Aces podcast, for tennis parents, by a tennis parent. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe to us and write a review on iTunes. For more information on navigating the junior and college tennis journey, please visit us online at parentingaces.com. Thanks for tuning in and sharing us with your tennis community.